Imagine standing in front of a wall of blinding bright lights with $1 million on the line while your stomach is actually growling, because the last thing you ate was a half-crushed granola bar you found in a giveaway bag 3 days ago. That was my reality, and let me tell you, looking into the camera lens knowing that if I got the next question wrong, I was going back to sleeping behind a dumpster, was the most terrifying moment of my entire life. I wasn't just playing for a trophy or a vacation. I was playing for the right to exist, the right to have a door that locks, and the right to not be invisible anymore. When the host asked me that final question, my heart wasn't just beating. It was slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape my body, and for a split second, I saw my entire future vanish into thin air. I need you to listen to this and tell me honestly. If you had been through what I went through, if you had been discarded by everyone who was supposed to love you, would you have kept the money for yourself, or would you have done what I did in the end? Was I a hero for how I handled that $1 million, or was I just a bitter kid looking for a way to hurt the people who hurt me? To understand how I ended up on a national game show stage in a suit that was 3 sizes too big for me, you have to understand where I started. 6 months before the cameras started rolling, I was just another anonymous kid in a faded hoodie, trying to stay warm in the public library. I was 17 years, 11 months, and 2 weeks old when my stepmother decided that the house wasn't big enough for her new baby, and a reminder of the past, like me. My dad didn't even look up from his phone when she told me my bags were on the porch. He just said I was nearly an adult, and it was time to learn how the world works. The world works in cold, hard ways when you have $42 in your pocket and nowhere to go. I spent the first few weeks riding the night bus until the drivers kicked me off. Then I found a spot under the bridge near the industrial park. I learned quickly that being homeless as a teenager isn't like the movies. It's not an adventure, it's a constant, grinding battle against exhaustion, hunger, and a deep, soul-crushing shame. You don't realize how much of your identity is tied to an address until you don't have one. I spent my days in the library, not just for the heat, but because books were the only place I could disappear. I read everything. Encyclopedias, history books, science journals. I became a walking vault of useless information because it was the only thing I truly owned. I would sit in those high-backed wooden chairs, pretending to be a student, while secretly checking the corners of the room for any leftover snacks people might have left behind. My skin was constantly dry, my clothes were stiff with salt and dirt, and I had a permanent cough that wouldn't go away. But in my head, I was traveling through time, learning about the rise and fall of empires, the structure of atoms, and the intricacies of the legal system. It was my only escape from the reality of the damp concrete and the smell of exhaust fumes. I remember one specific night where the temperature dropped so low I could see my breath inside my makeshift cardboard fort. My fingers were too numb to hold a pen, so I just recited facts about the French Revolution to myself to keep my brain from shutting down. I told myself that if I could survive the terror of 1793 in my head, I could survive a Tuesday night in October. People would walk past me and see a statistic, a problem to be solved by the city, or just a shadow they didn't want to touch. But under that dirty hoodie was a brain that was absorbing every bit of data it could find. I wasn't just staying alive. I was preparing for a war I didn't even know was coming. One afternoon, while I was charging my dying phone at a kiosk, an ad popped up for a local casting call for a new trivia show called The Great Escape. The premise was simple. People with incredible stories of survival competing in a high-stakes knowledge gauntlet. I figured, I'm already surviving, and I know more about the Byzantine Empire and quantum mechanics than I do about where my next meal is coming from. Why not? I showed up to the audition smelling like cheap wet wipes and desperation. The producers looked at me like I was a mistake, a glitch in their shiny, polished world. I could see them holding their breath when I walked past, but then I started talking. I told them my story, not for pity, but because I had nothing left to lose. I told them about how I studied by the light of a street lamp, how I used the reflections in shop windows to check my appearance so I wouldn't look too homeless to enter public spaces, and how I could tell you the capital of every country in the world while my feet were literally freezing. They loved the human interest angle. They didn't see a boy in pain. They saw a homeless prodigy and smelled massive ratings. They spent 3 hours interviewing me, digging into the trauma, asking me exactly how it felt when my father closed the door, They wanted the tears. They wanted the tragedy. I gave them enough to get on the show, but I kept my fire hidden. Before I knew it, I was being whisked away to a studio, given a makeover that felt like a lie, and told to smile for the introductory package that would air before my episode. They gave me a suit that was too big, trying to make me look like a charming underdog, but all I felt was like a fraud. Every time the makeup artist touched my face, I thought about the public restrooms where I'd scrubbed my skin with brown paper towels just hours before. As I sat in that makeup chair, feeling the weird sensation of someone touching my face with soft brushes, all I could think about was my dad and stepmother. I knew they'd be watching. They loved game shows. They used to sit every evening with their snacks, judging the contestants, calling them stupid or lucky. I could almost see them sitting on that velvet sofa I used to be allowed to sit on, probably making fun of the poor kid on TV before they realized it was me. The anger was like fuel. It kept me sharp. It kept me focused through the grueling 16-hour filming days where I was running on nothing but coffee and adrenaline. The first round was a blur of rapid-fire questions. What is the boiling point of gold? Who was the primary architect of the Great Wall? I answered them before the host even finished speaking. I could feel the other contestants, a PhD student and a high-end corporate lawyer, looking at me with a mix of pity and growing fear. They had libraries in their homes. I had the library on 4th Street and a desperate need to not starve. By the time we hit the halfway mark, I was the clear frontrunner, and the studio audience was chanting my name. But that's when things got complicated. In the green room during a break, one of the producers came up to me, looking way too excited. She whispered that my story had gone viral based on the coming soon teasers on social media. My father had reached out to the network. Suddenly, he was claiming he had been searching for me for months, that it was all a big misunderstanding, that I had run away in a fit of teenage rebellion, and that he was so proud of his brave son. I felt sick to my stomach. He wasn't looking for me. He was looking for a piece of the prize. He was looking for a way to look like a good person on national television before the truth came out. He had even sent a photo to the producers, a picture of us from 5 years ago when things were okay, to prove he was a loving dad. The producers were eating it up. They wanted a reconciliation special. They told me they were flying him in for the finale. They thought they were giving me a gift, but they were actually handing me a death sentence for my soul. I spent the next hour in a private bathroom stall, shaking, trying not to vomit. I realized that my survival wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the narrative. If I won and hugged him on stage, I would be validating his lies. I would be telling the world that it's okay to throw your child away as long as you show up when they become famous. So here I am, halfway through the biggest night of my life, realizing that the people who threw me away like trash are now waiting at the finish line with their hands out, ready to claim the credit for my resilience. I had to decide right then if I was going to play the game their way or mine. I had to decide if $1 million was worth the price of my dignity. Before I tell you what happened when the final question was read, and how I dealt with my family's sudden love, I want you to stop and think about this. I was a kid who had nothing, who slept on cardboard, and suddenly I was looking at $1 million, but the people who broke me were trying to claim the victory as their own. They were literally in the building, getting their own makeup done, preparing to take a victory lap on my shoulders. If you were me, would you have walked away from the money just to spite them? Or would you have taken every cent and vanished into the night? Would you have played along with the cameras just to get the check? Or would you have risked losing everything to tell the truth? Drop a comment right now and tell me. Would you forgive a family that abandoned you if it meant sharing a fortune? Or would you cut them out forever even if it meant a massive legal headache and public drama? The tension in the studio was thick enough to choke on. The final round was called the ultimate sacrifice. The host, a man with teeth too white and a voice too loud, looked me in the eye and said, "This is for $1 million, Leo. If you get this right, your life changes forever. If you get it wrong, you leave with nothing but the clothes on your back." The stage was dark, except for a single spotlight on me. I could hear the hum of the cooling fans and the distant cough of someone in the back row. The question was about a niche piece of maritime history, the exact tonnage of a specific 18th century shipwreck, the Vasa, something I had read in a discarded, Water damage book 3 months ago while huddling under a tarp during a rainstorm. I knew the answer. I knew it down to the last decimal. I remember the exact page of the book. It was stained with coffee and smelled like mildew, but the numbers were burned into my brain. But as I opened my mouth to speak, I looked over into the family and friends section of the audience. There they were. My father and my stepmother, sitting in the front row, wearing their best clothes. Clothes probably bought with credit they expected me to pay off. They were waving at me like we were the perfect, happy family. My father had tears in his eyes. Fake, oily tears that didn't match the coldness I remembered from the day he watched me carry my trash bag of belongings out the door. He mouthed the words, "I love you," as the cameras panned to him for that perfect emotional reaction shot. He wanted the world to see him as the supportive father of the year. The man who raised a genius. He was already leaning forward, ready to jump on stage. In that moment, I realized that if I won, they would use the legal system, public pressure, and every bit of family obligation guilt to drain me dry. They'd claim I was a minor when I entered, or that I owed them for raising me for 17 years. They were already talking to a publicist in the hallway. I felt a wave of cold, calculated fury. I looked back at the host. I gave the correct answer. I said it clearly, firmly, and with a smile that was as sharp as a razor. The tonnage was 1,210 tons. The host paused for dramatic effect. The music swelled into a crescendo. Low. You are a millionaire. The confetti exploded. It was like a blizzard of gold and silver. The music soared. The audience went wild. I was a millionaire. But I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let them have their happy ending. I wasn't going to be their Cinderella, if it meant they got to be the godparents. The host brought my father and stepmother onto the stage for the big reunion moment. The cameras were zooming in, expecting a tearful cinematic hug that would go viral for all the right reasons. My father reached out to embrace me, his arms wide, his face twisted into a mask of fake joy, ready to claim his prize. I stepped back, my hands raised, stopping him mid-stride. The look of confusion on his face was the first real thing I'd seen from him in years. I took the microphone from the host's hand, which I'm pretty sure wasn't in the script because the floor director started panicking and waving his arms. The entire studio went silent. I looked directly into the main camera, the one streaming to millions of homes, and I said, "I'm glad you're all here to see this. Especially you two. My father and stepmother threw me out onto the streets 6 months ago because I was an inconvenience to their new life. They watched me walk away with a backpack and didn't call once to see if I was warm or fed. They didn't care if I lived, died, or starved until they saw a dollar sign over my head tonight." My father's face went from a fake smile to a mask of pure, humiliated horror. My stepmother tried to grab the mic, but I held it away. The audience gasped so loud it sounded like the room lost all its oxygen. You could hear a pin drop. I continued, "So here's the deal. Since I'm technically still a week away from being 18, I've already spent my breaks today speaking to a legal aid lawyer I met at the shelter. I've signed documents. This prize money is going into a locked, third-party trust that no guardian can touch without a court order. And every single cent of the first 100,000 is going directly to the youth shelter that actually fed me when my parents wouldn't. You don't get to be my family just because I'm rich now. You gave up that right the day you changed the locks." The look on my stepmother's face was worth more than the $1 million. She looked like she wanted to scream, but she knew the cameras were still on her. They tried to argue. They tried to scream that I was being an ungrateful brat, that they had sacrificed for me. But the cameras were rolling and the world was watching their true colors leak out. My father actually tried to lunge at me, but security was already there. They were escorted off the stage by security while the crowd, after a long, stunned silence, started to cheer louder than they had for the win itself. People were standing on their chairs. It wasn't just a win for me. It was a win for every kid who's ever been told they weren't enough. The aftermath was a total whirlwind of lawyers, headlines, and chaos. My dad tried to sue me the very next day, claiming I was mentally unstable, or that the money belonged to the head of the household. But because of my public outburst and the mountains of evidence from the shelter, the library logs, and even neighbors who saw me being kicked out, the court ruled entirely in my favor. The legal battle lasted 4 months. It was exhausting. They tried to drag my name through the mud, telling local news that I was a troubled teen with a history of lying. But the public was on my side. People who had seen me at the library came forward. The night bus driver even testified about how he'd let me stay on the bus for extra loops when it was raining. The truth has a way of coming out when there's $1 million shining a light on it. I moved into a modest apartment. Nothing fancy, just a place with a heater that worked and a door that locked. I finished my GED in record time and started a scholarship fund for other kids who have been discarded by the system. I didn't buy a mansion or a sports car. I bought security. I bought a life where I never have to wonder where my next meal is coming from. I spent my first rich meal at a diner, ordering everything on the menu just because I could, then giving half of it to the guy sitting on the corner outside. My father and stepmother are now social pariahs in our town. They lost their jobs because their employers didn't want the bad PR of being associated with those people who abandoned their son. They eventually had to move to a different state just to escape the dirty looks at the grocery store. They lost their dignity, they lost their reputation, and they didn't get a single dime of my money. I heard they're struggling to pay their own rent now. The irony isn't lost on me. Looking back, I realized that the $1 million wasn't the real prize. The real prize was the power to finally say no, and the ability to define my own worth on my own terms. I learned that family isn't about who shares your DNA. It's about who stands by you when the lights are off, not just when they're shining on a stage. I learned that knowledge really is power, but only if you have the courage to use it. This experience taught me that no matter how dark things get, you have to keep your mind sharp and your heart guarded. I went from the cold pavement to a life of abundance, but I never forgot the feeling of that granola bar in the giveaway bag. It keeps me grounded. Every time I look at my bank account, I think about the library and the bridge. It reminds me that I'm not just a winner. I'm a survivor. If you ever find yourself in a position where the people who hurt you come crawling back because you've found success, remember that you don't owe them anything. You don't owe them a second chance just because they're family. Your success is a mountain you climbed alone while they were trying to pull the ladder up. Like this video if you think I did the right thing by calling them out on national television. And subscribe if you want to hear more stories of people standing up for themselves against all odds. Your support helps me keep these stories alive. Do you think I should have tried to reconcile with my dad for the sake of a relationship? Or was I right to cut him off in front of the whole world? Was I too harsh, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll be reading as many as I can. I'll see you all in the next story.